everybody, and welcome back to Beyond the Trailer Park. It's been a little while. I've kind of been away, but that's okay. I'm back. Here I am. And I want to say Morgan and Beth did a good job of keeping things going while I was gone. So totally appreciate that. Good job, ladies. And they're both here this week again. So welcome from Pennsylvania, Beth.
Howdy, howdy. Welcome home. It's nice to have you taking over the controls again.
Except I made you set up this show again, too, because I was away last weekend.
But I got the hang of it.
You did. You did very nicely, too.
Yeah, now all we got to do is figure out XSplit.
Yes. And Morgan, you're next. As she says, But good evening, Morgan.
Good evening.
Hey, after you wrote the bar, you can handle a silly little podcast, right?
I hope so.
Sure you can.
We'll see.
Hey, and there's a Triss in the house. Good evening, Triss. I see you over there in the chat. Hi. It's good to see you back too. So I would talk a bit about the trip, but we're a little crunched for time at the beginning because one of our guests is limited on time this evening. So,
but I wanted to hear about the disastrous road trip, though. I saw it all on Facebook.
Well, I can give you a couple minutes in a sec. Okay. So, Kevin, welcome.
Thank you.
And you do a little show called
This Week in News with Kevin and Benedict,
which you said was the most original title ever.
Look, I'm not going to say I'm a pun master, but I really had to rack my brain to get that one out. It was just a whole ordeal. We had 20 or 30 names written down. We had to keep going down the list. It was a long process.
So now, are you the cartoon with the beard or the clean shaven?
I am the one with the beard, and just. Awesome. For people who can see that cartoon, the one on the right is my co-host Benedict, and that cartoon definitely has more hair than he has in real life. I love to bring that up. I told the cartoonist to make it special for him.
Shot over the bow. Awesome. And welcome back again is Mike from the Skeptic's Guide to Conspiracy, who also, Kevin and Mike are joining us for two reasons, other than the fact that they're also good podcasters, but they are both ex-Catholics, which is kind of pertinent for today's discussion. So welcome, Mike.
Hello, everyone.
Hey. And we were just discussing there's a threat of thunderstorms and tornado in Mike's neck of the woods. So if anybody sees Mike get sucked out the window, call 911.
Yes, please.
All right. So for those of you who might be wondering, so I did go on vacation for most of August. We left 28th of July. And our intention was to go on a really epic motorcycle trip for 3 whole weeks. We did 2 weeks on the bike last year. We were going to do 3, and we were going all the way to Vegas and then up through Wyoming and Colorado and Minnesota and up through Wisconsin and then make it up to my niece's wedding this past weekend. Well, we made 2 days on the bike. And it started having trouble outside of Joplin, Missouri, and we made it to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and at which time we decided that going any further would not be a good idea. And we drive a BMW, which means that we can't just take it to any motorcycle shop. And indeed, we even called a Harley dealership to see if they would take a look, and they're like, BMW? We don't know nothing about no BMW. So, and it happened on a Sunday night, which meant that all of the repair places were closed on Monday. So we spent a day in Tulsa, and we managed to have lunch with the lovely Amanda Baguette, who is let me think now. She's the assistant director of American Atheists for Oklahoma. And if I got that wrong, Amanda, I'm sorry. I'm trying to remember what was on your business card. But, and also the other half of Holy Kool-Aid. So we had a lovely lunch with Amanda, and she was very hospitable and all of that. So that made it much nicer than it otherwise would have been. But it turns out when we got it looked at, they thought they could fix it what it was. But we have to order the part. It'll be in the morning. So we were stuck in Tulsa for another day. Second day, they fixed the part that they thought the problem was. Turns out that wasn't the problem. It had blown 2 valves in the cylinder, which I'm not a gearhead, so I only know what that is because I made sure and asked. But it wasn't good. Now, they could fix it, but it could have taken weeks, months, days. They didn't know. And we had to be in Vegas by Friday, and this was already Wednesday. So we just were like, no. So we rented a car. We got to Vegas, but it meant that we had to cancel the entire second half of the trip because we then had to go back to Tulsa and get the bike, whereas we were going to originally go from Vegas up north and not go back the same way. So we ended up home almost a week early. And, my husband's been figuring out how he thinks he can fix the bike himself, and it'll be okay. But, well, Matt, why didn't you tell me? Get in here. I'll send you a link, Matt. Sorry, Matt Gilmore. He's in the chat telling me, well, I'm an ex-Catholic. I'm like, damn it. I forgot. But anyway, so we did make it to Vegas, and we did make it to the Grand Canyon, which was really epic. And we were going to go on the way to Vegas, but we ended up going there on the way back to Vegas. Got back to Tulsa, picked up the bike in a U-Haul because you can't fit a big ass motorcycle in what did we have? A Nissan Altima for the week. So yeah, you should have seen me trying to get in and out of the goddamn U-Haul. Those things are high. But anyway, that's the short version of the trip. So
well, I'm glad you broke down where you did. Although I did find out, like, if you would have broke down here in Emporium, where I live, that you've come to visit many times, would have been shit out of luck. Although I did find out that our one small engine repair shop allegedly does Beamers.
yeah.
If I broke down here, you would have had to travel 3 hours to Pittsburgh.
Well, look, I did a road trip this last week, too, from California to D.C., and I can't tell anyone about seeing the Grand Canyon or any other beautiful sights, but I do know some of the best truck stops along the route now. So if you need that, let me know.
Truck stops are good. And I have now a new appreciation for, I've never had Steak and Shake before. Good.
Oh,
And then I had a bunch of people, you got to go to Whataburger. So we did finally find a Whataburger, and that was quite good as well, I have to say. But neither one of them are Harvey's, which is a Canadian chain. So it was good, but not as good as Harvey's. But those were fun. And, we did get to meet Amanda. Well, I'd met Amanda before, but we got to hang out with Amanda. And I did get to meet Jim Baker in Indianapolis. So that was cool. He's been on my friends list for a while. And Matt says, let me turn on my computer. Yes, you might want to turn on your computer, dude. But yeah, that was good. And and then in Vegas, there was Eric from my friends list that we went and had coffee with. So that was fun. A couple other folks in that area, unfortunately, we weren't able to catch up with, but I'd like to go back at some point. I didn't see everything because, and Callie, of course, I got to spend an afternoon at a Star Trek convention with Callie Wright. So who can beat that? and I did get to what? Sorry, Beth?
Make me insanely jealous.
I know.
One of my idols, especially since my stroke, and Michelle.
I told her about that. She was very, very touched by it, I think.
But yeah.
And I got to go to the Gays in Space party afterwards, which was quite fun. That was the company that Callie was helping run the booth for at the convention. So met William Shatner, Jonathan Frakes. I yelled hello to Marina Sirtis in the hall because, you know, that's what you do. I met Aaron Iserman, which was cool. Just hanging out, waiting for an Uber. He's like, "Oh, hi, I'm Aaron." I'm like, "Yeah, I know." Hi.
Fresh my
And
number.
he played Nog on Deep Space Nine.
Oh, you got to meet Nog.
I did. He's
Wow.
a very charming fellow. Very lovely fellow.
I'm kind of an old school Trekkie, so some of the newer people I get.
That was 25 years ago, dear.
See, it's always distressing for me when people talk about Star Trek because I'm a slightly younger man. And for me, Harry Potter was the thing. And I've had this argument with Callie Wright about the superiority of Harry Potter over Star Trek. But nobody seems to understand the struggle.
No, I'm afraid I'm older than Callie. And so, yeah, no, I wouldn't understand that.
I tried reading Harry Potter and I read all the books, but it just didn't do the same thing for me that I'm an original Star Trek person. And I do appreciate Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, but Life is Interruptus kind of barged in. So Deep Space Nine and anything after that kind of got thrown by the wayside.
And Triss says, "Oh, you cannot debate Star Trek with Callie." She's right. They're right for sure.
But
So
has a really, really, I don't know what the word, I'll say interesting for lack of a better word, is what it means to her. And
yeah.
I think it's
she actually spoke at the party specifically about what Star Trek meant to her. So that was really cool. But before we get too sidetracked, and Kevin, this is your fault. The guy who didn't have much time is the one that asked me to tell stories, but okay. We'll get into the topic, I think, just because, as I say, Kevin's supposed to be off recording with his co-host. So, and Matt, welcome back. Matt Gilmore is joining us back because I see this is my problem is I know I have lots of ex-Catholic friends, but remembering who the ex-Catholics are sometimes is difficult. So thank you for telling me.
No problem. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, you sound great.
Okay.
Awesome. So before Kevin has to run off, I don't know if any of you saw my post that I made a day or so ago, but I basically said, look, we've known now about this problem with sex abuse in the Catholic Church for at least 17 years on an international scale, because that's when the Spotlight story broke. And we still have people that are defending the church. We still have people that give money to the fucking church. And I just said, look, if you've given money as a Catholic to the church anytime in the last decade, and I'm being generous because it's been 17 years and longer, then you are directly supporting child abuse. And got a little bit of flack from a couple people over that. I don't really give a shit. But Kevin, what's your take on the whole mess?
Well, just for some context, I went to 11 or 12 years of Catholic school from kindergarten until my sophomore year of high school. So I have a lot of experience with Catholicism and, you know, obviously a lot of damage coming out of that. Luckily, I was never abused by any priests or anyone in the Catholic Church. I don't have that experience. But being a Catholic, growing up that way, you hear about it a lot. People would always bring it up. Non-Catholics would always use it to go after the Catholic Church. And so you always hear about it. And there was, at one point, my parish in Sacramento, California, a priest who left under mysterious circumstances. And so it was always rumored that that was what had happened there. I never knew about that, but that was always the rumor that people would talk about. Yep. So we have this Pennsylvania grand jury report out now, which details some truly horrific things. They found thousands of victims. over about, I believe it was 60 or 70 years. I don't remember how many priests they identified, but the numbers are staggering in this, honestly, because nobody imagines that many pedophiles and abusers in one place for any length of time. We can't imagine that. We know they're out there, but for them to be so concentrated in the Catholic Church is truly staggering. And so it makes me think of, well, why do they all get there? Is this something that happens because they've become priests, they're sexually repressed, and they act out in these ways? Or is this something that people like this are drawn to the priesthood? Are the kinds of questions that I ask. And I think we need to figure shit like this out, because we all know we're not going to get rid of religion. But we need to manage it, right? We need to manage these problems. And one of the huge problems the Catholic Church has is obviously this shuffling around a priest and trying to hide the problem. And that's what's made them one of the largest sources of all this child abuse and et cetera. So for me, looking on this from the outside in, I try and ask the question, well, how do we solve this problem? And I know telling people not to give money to the Catholic Church and all that, I mean, that's a way to do it. But honestly, we're only reaching within our bubble. So it takes government effort. It takes things like these grand jury reports to hopefully get to some people out there and make them realize that this is a bad idea, giving money to this organization, that they're not giving money to God. They're giving money to men who are using that money to do terrible, terrible things. And so this is the problem I think we all struggle with, is how to reach people outside of who are already in our community, who are atheists, who are skeptics, who are whatever. The difficulty is in reaching them and changing their minds. And this does some of that. I've seen a lot of commentary on the grand jury report. Some of it, people trying to apologize for what the Catholic Church has done. I saw one bishop from that diocese saying that the Catholic Church of this report is not the Catholic Church we have today. Given that many of these are so recent, I think that's hard to believe, honestly.
That's pretty rich.
It really is. And it's the same thing, the political climate we're in right now transcends everything. We live in an age of political religion. And that sort of creeps into all corners. And people in the era of Donald Trump and everything going on right now are just grasping, they're huddling back into their corners as tight as they can and defending what they know and disregarding evidence to the contrary. And that is a huge problem. I mean, obviously, my show is mainly about politics, but I have all these ideas about political religion, which is something I studied in college. And it's an enormous problem. We need to break down one barrier to reach the other, but you can't start on either yet. Some way we have to come at both at the same time, even though that may be impossible.
Yeah. It's just, and I understand how some people who might have been raised Catholic that might still think of themselves as Catholic have a hard time processing that something they've been taught as a good thing is inherently bad. I get that, but the lame excuses I've been hearing are just ridiculous. I had one fellow on that particular thread who I didn't know he was a Catholic. He doesn't say what his religion is on his profile, and he got all, well, you can't blame the church for the actions of a few bad apples. I'm like, I'm blaming the church for the church's actions.
Well, and the phrase is, a few bad apples spoils the barrel. You can't blame a few bad apples, right? And that's the problem, is they're not getting rid of the bad apples.
No, they're
the whole thing's rotten from the core.
They're taking the bad apple out of one barrel and sticking it in another barrel and hoping no one will notice.
Well, I think what it gets to too, regarding like the commenter on your post, is that this is not recent, okay? And we might get into this a bit later, but I have information going back to the first publicized case that's actually documentary. And if you go searching for it, it will show up. It will be your first one. I posted some information in the group about it, but this has been going on at least bare minimum since 1948. The Catholic Church, the Vatican, has known that pedophilia within the clergy is a problem.
Well, I saw a meme today to the effect, I'm paraphrasing, that indigenous folks would argue that child abuse by the Catholic Church has been going on since 1492.
Well, exactly. There. I have seen reports. I will call them speculative because I have not checked them out, but basically, the issue of pedophilia itself within the Catholic Church goes back to day one.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
For sure. There's like different historical reports and different things like that, and different innuendos and things that you'll read in literature and things of that nature. But yeah, and the Catholic Church, I don't think they're unique in this aspect of this is a area where pedophiles are drawn to, whether, whatever causation causes that. But because, for example, like I was raised Baptist, and we always heard about some weird youth pastor, right? So, but the difference is, like, with evangelicals, there's not really this formal hierarchy other than, like, maybe the Southern Baptist Convention, but then again, that's just, a bunch of old white dudes that meet and, decide on, like, doctrine and things like that. So they don't have, like, the structure as far as we don't have a pope, we don't have, like, an archdiocese, we don't have, we didn't have any of that. So it is, I feel like it's easier to indict the Catholic Church, and it's fair to indict them because they have been complicit not just in the crimes, but also the cover-up, which, they also say the cover-up is often worse than a crime. Instead of acknowledging that this is a problem and getting rid of them, they're just sending them to these areas like South America where it's like, well, nobody will care if those kids talk about being abused, or those kids will have an incentive not to talk as much about being abused because they rely so much on the church's charity. So, it's all about preserving that image, but it's fracturing and it's falling apart. And, Kevin was talking about what we can do when, because we're in this bubble. And what we can do is, so a lot of these allegations, nothing can really be done legally because of a statute of limitations, whether that's criminal or whether that's, civil action, which involves suing basically the church or the priest or what have you. God knows they have plenty of money to pay this out, but not that would make up for it. But what we can do is we can call on our state legislatures to extend statute of limitations on allegations of abuse. And we can urge them to take action and point to this report and say, look, we have this report. Do you really think that, this many victims is just randomly making it up? And it takes a long time to process this trauma, and it does. And you have repressed memories and issues like that. And so the fact that nothing can be done legally is just, it's really a travesty.
Yeah, I agree. I think because, there's no statute of limitations on murder. And I think when people try and rank the crimes, it usually goes murder and pedophilia right up there at the top, right? Sometimes changing places with each other in people's minds. I think, honestly, there's no reason why there should be a statute of limitations on a pedophilia. And I understand the legal difficulty of trying to prosecute a crime that's 50 years old or something like that. But I think these crimes are so horrendous, we have to consider that in this issue.
Well, but even civilly.
Goes with that is you're looking at children who are being abused by supreme authority figures in their lives. So this is not something where it's easy by any means at all for a kid to go and say, Father so-and-so did something wrong, when these priests are being treated as though they're told they're God's representative on earth. They are almost the same as God in some respects, or they are the authority figure in that kid's life. They're the father figure if the child maybe doesn't have a father. I mean, the power dynamics involved are astronomical and don't hold a candle to really any other situation where, like, for instance, if it's a babysitter or something, you're not told, like, you're told to obey your babysitter, but you're not told that the babysitter is God's representative on earth who, has the power to absolve you of your sins and shit.
Well, I think your twat waffle commenter made a very tough statement towards the end of your discussion. He goes, the church is not just an organized group of humans. It is an infallible authority instituted by God.
Well, and that gets to the difficulty of getting to these people, right? Where honestly, they believe that all this is true. And to us on the other side of the curtain, it seems so apparent that they are just a group of people who are using their authority to really push their own will, or maybe some of them, honestly, what they perceive as God's will. It's so easy for us on this side, but it's a lot more difficult to get through. Because I remember before I became an atheist, I had to find ways to excuse away things that I saw as ridiculous. I think we all did, those of us who were religious at one point in our lives. And it's really difficult because everyone wants to be right. There's a huge confirmation bias that we all have. We all don't want to deal with the hard questions. We don't want to get into that area. So we find ways to get around it. It's very easy. I had this discussion on my show the other day about Omarosa and the supposed tape of Donald Trump using the N-word. If that tape were to come out, Donald Trump's supporters, I honestly don't think he'd get below 30% in the polls, because there'd be enough people who'd try to excuse it and say, oh, this was X number of years ago, or he's apologized, or whatever the case may be.
It's just like grab him by the pussy. They're, oh, well, it's locker room. It was your
exactly.
Comments regarding these alleged tape where, if the tape comes out, it doesn't matter because I think the same way he does.
That too, yeah.
Like, well,
but I think this goes deeper to an extent, because it's a horrifying realization to be like, I've been going to this church, I've been trusting these people, I've been doing this, I've been thinking.
Well, and it's they've wound up their whole identity in I'm a Catholic, right?
And no one wants to think that I've been complicit in the abuse of thousands and thousands of children. Like, that is a very hard thing to come to terms with.
And I think that, like, the guy who got upset in my thread, I think that was part of the problem, because I said, if you've given money in the last 10 years, you are directly contributing to the abuse of children. And I am positive, based on the subsequent interaction, he's probably tithed, maybe even recently. And he got upset that I was telling him to his face that he was complicit in the abuse of children. And I'm sorry, but he is. If he gave money, he is. There's no way around it.
Well, I think it goes to the fact that, especially within the Catholic Church, and being that I'm basically a Catholic wannabe. I was raised Lutheran, as close to the Catholic Church as you can get without being Catholic.
Except evangelicals will still call you Christian.
Yeah.
Well,
You're not quite part of the whore of Babylon yet.
Yeah, then there's that whole debacle, but it's indoctrination. I mean, it's out and out indoctrination, and that's why I call it hereditary religion.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be hard for the general, we'll say, lay people who are, quote, good Catholics, who really don't have, other than tithing, anything to do with this debacle, but they cannot ignore what the Attorney General has come out with. And that's only 6 out of 8 dioceses. There's 8 dioceses in Pennsylvania. And it really hit home for me because I live in PA now. And one of the schools involved is 30 minutes away. I know students that went to that school. I have a friend who's originally from Buffalo. I went to high school, junior high and high school with her. And she has family members that went to that school during the time period in question. And it's like, geez, do I know anybody that's actually been physically assaulted? I don't know.
And this is just one state.
Yeah, this is just one. So, I mean, my hopes is that every state will do something similar with what, the PA Attorney General did. And going back to a point you made about the statute of limitations, one of the biggest fighters of extending the statutes, especially in Pennsylvania, is the Catholic Church. They're fighting against extending these statutes of limitations.
Yes.
And if you bloviating Bill Donahue, his whole reasoning is, well, they don't make the schools do it. Public school. It's the Catholics are going after.
I had some other dork in my thread going on about the public schools. I'm like, we're not talking about the fucking public schools here, people. Like,
has there been a report about the public schools and how there's a pattern of abuse in public schools and
public school administration are systematically bouncing teachers around so that they don't get discovered? And
no, it's just a series of horrific mass shootings they want to keep ignoring.
Well, there's that. Yes,
yeah, there's that.
There's definitely that.
That goes to one of the issues with this whole thing. It's this systematic abuse. It's not just, yes, you know, and I say this anytime we talk about the pedophilia issue, it's not just the Catholic Church. We know that. We're not fucking stupid.
Exactly.
I have a blog full, 5,000 posts and counting. I'm almost up to 6,000 now. Not all my posts are dealing with it, of priests or lay clergy who have diddled children. But it's the Catholic Church that is specifically hiding and covering.
That's right. And that's why we get so angry about them, because it's not because, and as I said to the guy on my thread, it's not that there aren't other institutions that have pedophiles in them. It's that this institution is hiding the pedophiles within its ranks.
Hiding.
And excusing them. And the one thing that angered me more than anything else, and that really got me thinking, fuck the Catholic Church, the fact that they are hiding assets in order to avoid paying the victims.
Yes. And that's what's happening in Milwaukee and in Minneapolis.
And they're actually letting individual parishes go bankrupt because those are the parishes that have judgments against them. So they're like, okay, well, that parish can go bankrupt. We're like the one parish, they sent all of their assets into an account to take care of a graveyard.
Yeah.
And so, oh, well, we've always done that. Well, no, your bank records say you fucking haven't always been doing that. Stop lying. And that's what they've done. They've taken all the assets, dumped them into account for the care of the local cemetery, and said, oh, we're broke. We can't pay. We're sorry. And they do it on purpose because they don't want to acknowledge the victims. They don't want to help the victim. Cases where victims have been given court-mandated therapy that the church is supposed to pay for, and the church will pay for, you know, a bare minimum, and oh, well, you should be fine now. We shouldn't have to pay anymore. Who the fuck are you to determine whether someone needs more therapy or not?
Well, I think that you and I both can attest to the fact that the aftermath of sexual abuse is not a one-day thing. It's not
forever.
It is
forever. In fact, what Kevin was saying about statute of limitations for murderers and not for this, I would argue that being the victim of assault, physical assault, sexual assault is worse than murder. Because at least if you get murdered, the pain stops after a while. And I say that from experience. I wasn't molested by a priest, but I understand it. You know, it never goes away. And just when you think that you got a good handle on everything, it'll come back and kick you in the ass when you least expect it.
Well,
and that's just the nature of the beast.
I never dealt with mine when it happened, and it wasn't until maybe we'll say about 8-10 years later when I got to college when it hit full force and I started literally having flashbacks. I mean, I'm like, what the fuck is this shit?
And you don't know when that's going to hit you. You may go 20 years and feel like I've finally got past this. It's finally, you know, I don't have to think about it anymore. And you get in a situation that you're not even thinking about it. And next thing you know, you're a mess and you don't know why.
Yeah. And so, and like you, I was not assaulted by clergy. But I can just imagine with the whole power structure that's
exactly.
I can imagine how much worse, if it's possible.
Well, I can kind of relate because my abuser was my grandfather, who was my babysitter, who I was told, this is your grandfather, you obey him, he's your guardian, this, and this. And it was not quite, he's God, but up there. So I can certainly equate with that. The authority power struggle is it plays so much worse into it.
Yeah,
it was somebody to look up to.
Yeah. And this is somebody you were taught that you are supposed to love. And you're taught you're supposed to love your priest because your priest is a representative of God and you're supposed to love God. So yeah, you're supposed to love Grandpa and you're supposed to love Father Chester,
So, I mean, yeah, it would make the dynamics much more difficult to deal with. And then you have the hierarchy who's just blowing it all away. Like,
And can you imagine how minuscule you would feel as a child who maybe did get the courage to say something and they're told, don't you say bad things like that. How dare you make those things up? Don't you, Father Chester wouldn't do that. What's wrong with you?
Well, Beth just talked about the two layers.
Yes. Yes, please.
Well, Beth just talked about the two layers here, right? Yeah. The power dynamic between priest and child who's in the parish, and then the hierarchy and the organizational structure. And these organizations exist to preserve themselves. Mm-hmm. So that's the main motivation going on here. Obviously, I don't think that the Catholic Church is in such bad faith that they don't believe a lot of what they're saying. I think they're, obviously just people who've grown up this way, who moral luck is a huge thing with me. They don't exactly have the opportunity to get out of the circles that they're in and to acquire something more in the way of thinking. But they obviously exist to perpetuate the Catholic Church. The reason you have parishes, the reason you have all these organizational structures is to protect and keep the Catholic Church alive. And so that's what they're doing. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of people acting in bad faith who have thought, whether they be independent of each other doing this or whether they be in direct cohort with one another doing this, hiding all these acts of pedophilia for so many years. It's just difficult to comprehend.
And the idea that in order to do that, they have basically decided that every child who comes along and says, Father so-and-so touched me inappropriately is lying. Like they have to think that if they legitimately believe that the church needs to be protected in those instances, they have to think that way to some extent. And I don't understand how the numbers that, like, 300 children in that one area alone saying I was abused in some manner by a priest, and they just well, you all must be lying.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, there've been a handful of cases where the kids were lying or the parents were trying to get some money, or a handful out of
like satanic panic.
It's the same thing whenever there's a sexual assault, somebody trying to defend a sexual assaulter, they bring up the Duke Lacrosse case, right? They always have that example, and they try and push that onto everything, just to sow enough doubt.
Well, when I was pondering this, and I actually had no intentions of even suggesting it as a topic for discussion on Beyond the Trailer Park, just because it's so encompassing. But the first thing that popped into my mind after I saw the AG report was Sinead O'Connor. And I mentioned it in our show because
sorry. One second, because Kevin's got to go. So I just want to give him a second to plug his stuff. And
I didn't want to interrupt the show.
Oh, it's all right.
It's
Well,
fine.
thanks for having me on. It's a great discussion. I'd love to come on again sometime. That'd be fantastic. And Deb,
And-
you're going to be on my show
Yeah.
coming up soon, next week, I think.
Yes. Yay.
We're reviewing some fantastic right-wing fiction. The Faith and Donald
lovely.
J. Trump, a spiritual biography. Check it
Oh.
out. You can find it. We also did some Dinesh D'Souza. That was the last book we reviewed.
Oh God! Don't even get me
Find it
started.
in your Christian fiction section. But yeah,
have a Cole's Notes version of this. I can see.
but yeah, everyone can find us over at This Week in News with Kevin and Benedict. You can find it on iTunes, Stitcher, all the usual podcast places, Google Music or whatever. I don't know what you Android people use. Android, you know what? Nobody understands the struggle of having an iPhone and seeing that text message go green. There's nothing worse. You can also find us at our website, kevinandbenedict.com. We have another podcast called This Week in History with Kevin and Benedict. Shorter show. We go over something that happened in history that week. It's a lot of fun. And you can find us on Facebook and Twitter at Kev and Benedict on both. Find us there. I usually tweet some musings and have a little fun there. So, yeah, check us out.
Well, thanks for taking the time to pop in and making Benedict wait for you.
No problem. No problem. Thanks for having me. I'll see you all again soon. Bye-bye.
Sorry about that, Beth.
That's fine. I have the chat screen open, so I didn't realize he had to go.
That's okay.
But
That's
yeah,
okay. Back to Sinead. Yes.
but yeah, I mean, if everybody remembers, in 1992, Sinead O'Connor was on Saturday Night Live, and I actually remember watching this episode, and I think I was still kind of on the edge. So even though I'm not Catholic, I thought, well, that was kind of rude. But she ripped up a picture of the Pope. At the time, it was John Paul II.
Very punk rock.
Yeah.
She took a lot of flack. She was lambasted in the media. And about a week, maybe 2 or so after that, she was interviewed by the LA Times, and she said this, quote, "It must be acknowledged what was done to us," and she's speaking of herself, and she's Irish Catholic, "done to us so we can forgive and be free. If the truth remains hidden, then the brutality under which I grew up will continue for thousands of Irish children, and it must be by any means necessary without the use of violence to prevent that happening, because I am a Christian. The Catholic Church have controlled us by controlling education through their teachings on sexuality, marriage, birth control, and abortion, and most spectacularly through the lies they have taught us with their history books." That was in 92. And she lambasted as being, as I have in my notes, as being a crazy bitch.
Yeah. I remember when she did that, and I was, at the time, I'd been an atheist for about 3 years or so. And I remember thinking, go girl, like fucking right, do that. But I was the only one. Everybody was like, oh my God, that's so disrespectful. I'm like, yeah, good.
In response to Clockwork Rex, the title of our show, Fight the Real Enemy, is basically what she had said. And it just made me think about it, because I had posted earlier in the week, probably around the same time, concerning Matt Staver from Liberty Counsel, applauding a new recent study, about conversion therapy being good and it works and there's no harm and yada, yada, yada. And that led me to look at the study, and here it was, a fucking self-reported survey from the Catholic Medical Association, who holds Catholic doctrine above and beyond anything. So, and this led down the path, because I started looking through some stuff. And like I had said earlier, this whole thing that the church has known bare minimum since 1948 goes to this congregation of Paracletes, congregation of the servants of Paracletes. And it was actually an organization that was founded in 1948, and it was part of the church proper, and it was created initially to treat problem priests, like with alcoholism and stuff like that. But they also started taking in priests to cure them of pedophilia. And if you dig nitty gritty, they actually at one point were intent on purchasing an island to, yes, literally purchasing an island so as to isolate them, the priests, from the general population, because they realized Father Gerald Fitzgerald, who founded this organization, determined that pedophile priests could not be cured.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, that's what they say about pedophiles in general, too.
Yes. And this was back in 48. So you're talking like, what, 70 years ago?
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I think for me, the responses that I see, whether it's from lay people that are Catholic or from the church hierarchy, is just so full of shit. You can't tell me you didn't know about this. Your own church, I mean, there's documents. You go to bishopsaccountability.org. They have documents, actual documents, scans of documents with Father Fitzgerald communicating with the Vatican, with the hierarchy within the church, saying, this is a problem.
Yeah.
And, this goes back to what you were saying, Deb, that, anybody who donates to the church in whatever manner they do, whether it's volunteering, tithing, any monetary gifts, they are complicit in this.
Yep.
So, Mike, you study conspiracy theories. Does this all sound like a big conspiracy to you?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I would put it under the real conspiracy category, because like I try to debunk the fake ones, but you can't debunk this thing. It's right there. It's so well known. It's not like this is like a one-off deal. It's not just one priest in one diocese. This is across the country. Boston.
It's international.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I've watched documentaries about this in Australia and Europe and other countries. We have it in Canada.
Yeah. I mean, I focus most on the U.S. stuff because that's enough right there. I mean, what I talking about dynamics here, because you're talking about these these they're Catholics are kind of a close-knit group. They tend to hang around with each other, and when a priest gets accused of something, I think some of the first things that happen is like if it's a family that brings up this issue to the diocese, they get pushed out. I mean, they lose that the Catholic group. They get pushed out of the group. Of course, you get the how could a priest do such a thing? That the kid must be lying or making up a story. And they kind of rally around their priest. So it's, and then of course when it comes out, then eventually find out that, okay, this priest gets shuffled off to a monastery somewhere, or he gets moved to a retreat here, or again, moved out of the country to Mexico or Central America, or wherever they send them to. Eventually they come back or whatever. They, they'll do all that kind of stuff. And then again, it's, there's within the Catholic community, they defend this. I don't see how, I really don't see how they can, because when when I read the post on Facebook and I'm reading this guy, it's like, dude, if you support the church, you're supporting this criminal activity. These are bishops and cardinals. They're hiding these priests, basically what is it? They're basically accomplices in the crime. You got the priest who who did the crime, and then now you're hiding it from the authorities. And
I think they call that accessory after the fact.
Yeah. So
yes, they do.
Yeah. So these should be
just the legal expert.
Yeah. But that should be the even maybe that's what they're afraid of is, okay, we don't want the general public to think that the Catholic Church is all pedophiles. So we gotta protect, we're protecting the church by hiding them or whatever. And
that just makes them more guilty.
Yeah. I mean, it's a crime has occurred. If it was somebody other than a Catholic priest getting caught, they'd be spending time in jail, but somehow the church seems to be they think they're above the law for some reason. I don't know. There just seems to be that.
When your rank and file believe that you're an infallible institution ordained by God, I bet you have a pretty high opinion of yourself too.
Well, I think
anybody else, they would be sued. They would be in jail. And also the fact that they're able to hide the assets, like Deb, you were talking about earlier, there's this concept of when corporations try and do that kind of thing, like when they're trying to hide that, oh, I wasn't the one who made that decision, that was my subsidiary, or that was this person who's not associated with us who did that. It's called piercing the corporate veil. When you're able to do that and you're able to look at their assets and everything that's going on behind the scenes. And I don't understand. I guess I do understand because they have great political power. Why they can't do the same for the Catholic Church. And again, it goes to like things that we can do, and we can call for extensions on the statute of limitations. They represent us as well as the Catholics in their congressional districts. So we can also call for that. We can call for them to be able to reach into those assets, because we all know the Catholic Church has tons and tons of money. And so any attempts to hide it, could easily be, again, is pierce the corporate veil and reach behind that curtain to try to shut down.
A lot of that too, though, in my opinion, Morgan, it goes to the whole issue of separation of church and state. And for some reason, the Catholic Church has been able to hide behind that. The church is special. But
I always think back to the opening scene of Spotlight, and that's the movie that they did chronicling the 93 Boston. Was it Boston Globe?
Yes, Boston Globe.
Yes. The expose they did. And it was a scene where they're at a police station, and there's a mother with a young child who is reporting. You realize that the mother and child are reporting abuse by a priest, and the priest is in another room, I guess, being questioned or whatnot. And an attorney comes in from the church and speaks to the duty officer. And I don't remember the exact dialogue, but paraphrasing was, oh, I've arranged a car to take Father so-and-so home. And the police officer is like, home? But they just said, and the other senior police officer is like, no, he's going home, and shut up about it. And the younger officer is just sitting there dumbfounded, like, what the fuck just happened? And the lawyer collects the priest, and off they go.
But going back to a point that Mike made, concerning like the debunking of conspiracy theory, and this is where bloviating Bill Donahue comes in part of this. He had a blog post, a letter, or I don't know what the hell you want to call it, and he titled it Pennsylvania Grand Jury Report Debunked. Okay, now he has 11 pages of garbage, but there were 3 quote myths specifically. I think he lists like 7 or 8 to justify the assertions that he makes. He goes, the first myth is fact. This is according to Donahue. This is an obscene lie. Oh, the myth. Wait a minute. Oh, there it is. The myth. Priests raped their victims. And this is something you alluded to in your post as well, Deb. In attempting to justify his assertion that the priests raped their victims is a myth, Donahue writes, quote, fact. This is an obscene lie. Most of the alleged victims were not raped. They were groped.
Oh, that's so much better.
Otherwise abused, but not penetrated. Which,
oh God, Lord!
Oh yeah, this guy. I'm sorry. I'm going to break every fucking rule in the book, especially my own. This guy is a fucking pig. Okay, he makes Donald Trump
look like a fine, upstanding citizen.
Yes, I mean,
yeah.
When I read this, I read his 11-page report. I was like. I mean, it's like I said to you earlier, Deb, my brain fucking hurts. It really does. Yeah. But he goes, which is what the word rape means, i.e. the penetration bullshit. Second myth, the report was warranted because of ongoing crisis in the Catholic Church. According to him, fact. There is no ongoing crisis. It's a total myth.
Yeah, everybody just got together and made up bullshit together. They just had a party of 1,000 victims and just came together and we're like, yeah, let's say Father whatever molested you. Yeah, that's what happened. Because people do that.
Pull a name out of a hat and that's your abuser, right?
Yeah, yep.
And then he goes on, in fact, there is no institution, private or public, that has less of a problem with sexual abuse of minors today than the Catholic Church. Okay, we've already
planet is this guy on?
We've already talked about it. This has been going on bare minimum since the 40s. Okay, it's an issue that Roman Catholic Church is well aware of. I don't know where he's pulling that from. Third myth he brings up and is
out
of his ass, yes.
Well, it's true. I mean, think about it, you know.
The third myth, the abusive priests were pedophiles. According to him, the fact is this. This is the greatest lie of them all. Repeated nonstop by the media and late-night talk TV hosts. There have been 2 scandals related to sexual abuse of minors in the Catholic Church. Scandal 1 involves the enabling of bishops who covered it up. Scandal 2 involves the media's cover-up of the role played by gay molesters. Folks, pedophilia and homosexuality are the same. And you wonder
I'm bi, but yet I've never molested a child. It's that must be absolutely wild.
We got two gay folks right here. I'm pretty sure neither one of them have been interested in kids ever.
No.
My rule is if they're 9 years younger, they're out of reach.
And see, my husband's 8 years younger, so I'm on the border or older. Sorry, he's 8.
Years ago, we had a cardinal that was head of the Chicago Archdiocese here, and somebody made an accusation against him, and it was a guy who was gay, and it was a big thing. And later on, this guy took his accusation back. Now, why that happened, I don't know, but it was really weird. And to this day, I still can't wrap my hands around it. And it was, Mike might know about this.
You know, I remember the story, but
Cardinal Bernardine.
Bernadine. But I don't. Like I said, I kind of remember it the way you do. It seemed to be the hot story. I mean, it made
Right.
the
Yeah, and
headlines.
that's what kind of broke out the whole thing here in Chicago.
Yeah, but
And
then but nothing. I don't think anything ever happened. Now that I'm thinking about it.
no, nothing really ever came about of it, and that's what kind of started the whole, at least here in the Chicago area with the archdiocese.
Yeah.
And there was a priest who was convicted of it, and he's already done his time, but now he's in a facility where I don't know, I guess he can't be released for some reason.
Oh, I know which case you're talking about. Oh.
It was a priest that molested like a 7-year-old child.
I'd have to pull it up.
I forget the priest's name, Daniel something.
Yeah, it's right on the tip of my tongue. In fact, I just posted about it the other day because there was an update. Oh, where is it? I won't find it fast enough. But yeah, that case has actually been going on for quite a while.
Right.
I mean, and generally, I don't follow the pedophilia cases in the Catholic Church unless they go to criminal court.
Right.
Because there's just so many of them. I mean, I'm one person. I can only keep up with some.
Would it be Daniel McCormick?
Yes.
McCormick?
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah, hang on. I got a headline here. Judge rules ex-Chicago priest Daniel McCormick is sexually violent.
Yes.
Says, this is from September of last year. Says Cook County judge ruled Friday that former Chicago priest Daniel McCormick is a sexually violent person and should remain indefinitely in a state facility for sex offenders. Judge Dennis Porter sided with state prosecutors seeking to prevent the convicted child molester from being released. His victims also wanted him to remain in custody. Well, I would hope so. They know how dangerous he is. They know how cunning he is, how manipulative he is, said Mark Perlman, attorney representing several of the victims. In 2007, McCormick pleaded guilty to sexually abusing 5 boys while he was a priest at St. Agatha Parish in Chicago's West Side. But court records show dozens of other boys alleged McCormick abused them as well. To be declared a sexually violent person, prosecutors must prove that McCormick has a mental disorder and will reoffend again. The state's only witness, forensic psychiatrist Dr. Angeline Stanislaus, diagnosed the former priest with pedophilia. She testified it is likely McCormick will offend again, especially since he continued to abuse boys after he was arrested and placed under supervision by the archdiocese. Oh, that supervision obviously worked well. Since the state filed its petition in 2009 to have McCormick declared sexually a violent person, the former priest has been held in a downstate facility for sex offenders. He appeared in court Wednesday, and his attorneys will have their own psychiatric expert as witnesses. They are relying on court records and documents as McCormick chose not to be interviewed. Sorry. Ugh. Barbara Doris, managing director of SNAP, which I'm not sure what that is, they don't say, released a statement saying, today former Catholic priest Daniel McCormick was found by a Cook County judge to be a sexually violent person. That means that for the present, former priest will remain at Illinois Department of Human Services facility for sex offenders, where he has been held since he completed his prison sentence. In November, the judge will decide whether Mr. McCormick will remain at the facility indefinitely or will be released to the community. Ooh, God, I hope they didn't.
I haven't heard anything about that.
Let me look. I just updated this not too long ago.
This story was from September.
September of last year?
Yes.
I
So
have
they were saying
31st is my last update, and he is ordered indefinitely committed to
Good.
facility, and this is as of July 31st of this month.
Okay, because I just saw a headline now from July 19th of this year.
And what's really bizarre, I don't get a lot of comments on my, which I don't really, it doesn't faze me one way or another, but I actually had one of his victims comment.
Oh, wow.
Sent me some information that I'm not going to disclose what it was, but it was something that I'd mentioned in one of my posts. And it was just like hearing it from somebody who had lived through this and having this person solidify what's been said in the media.
Right.
And then going back to Bill Donahue's statement where the media and late night hosts are making this shit up. Fuck you, Bill.
Well, what I want to know is now they've managed to get this guy indefinitely committed as a sex offender. So this is after, quote, several convictions. How many do we have to get to before we can indefinitely incarcerate one of these fuckers? Like, is it 2, 7, 10, 50? Like, I just...
one caveat I will make. Yes, the Catholic Church as a whole has responded to some degree. Then again, they have not.
Well, I think they've responded where their feet's been held to the fire and they've had no choice.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to drive at, but I lost the words in my mind.
Well, they've been forced to.
Yes, they've been forced to. This is not voluntary.
No, it's when they've been caught, when they've been exposed, when everybody knows that they're hiding one of these fuckers. That's when they'll point, oh, well, yeah, I guess we can prosecute this guy. Yeah, because everybody knows that you're trying not to prosecute him, you fuckers. Well, and by the way, just quickly wanted to say hi to Atheist Ranger. And I know Alan was way back there in the chat. If you're still there, Alan, howdy. He's a local. Just wanted to say hi to folks.
Oh, that's fine. No, I was going to say, in following the cases that I do follow, there have been some reports from out of the Catholic Church, or however you want to phrase it, where priests have been accused, but the Catholic hierarchy in self-investigating, have said, oh, they're not credible. And there are a few that I am aware of, there probably are more, or maybe less, that have been deemed not credible by the Catholic Church. 3-4 years later, this guy's fucking arrested for digital. So the Catholic Church cannot, police itself. And this is where, as Morgan has stated, we as atheists, as secular people, as, you don't even have to be an atheist, just fucking human. It has to, put more coals in the fire to get the Catholic Church to do shit. I mean, one of their biggest things that they hide behind is the sanctity of the confessional. And Matt, you might be able to, Mike might be able to respond more on this, but if an abused child were to confess that Father so-and-so stuck his finger up his butt, the Catholic can do because it was sudden confession.
Yeah, like could the priest even
move? They moved the priest to another diocese, and
but could the confessional priest even tell his superior about that?
Probably not.
Yeah.
It's the thing that priests actually admit in confession.
In their own confession, but they can't do anything because it's secret.
Right.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I know, this is going back a few years, I know there was a case in Louisiana that challenged this whole notion of the sanctity of the confessional. Now, as far as I know, if I remember correctly, the Catholic Church is the only religious organization out of the mainstream, anyways, that has this type of setup where you confess to a fucking priest.
Yeah, because even the Pope has to have somebody to confess to.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what, it just is a setup for hiding bad things, really. Because if the priest listening can't say anything to anyone, and this is how these abusers probably assuage their whatever minimal conscience they might have. They can go to their confessor, confess what they did, get absolution, and be like, oh, well, God's okay with me now. And I'll try really hard not to do it again until they fuck up and do it again. And then they just start the process all over again.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
for priests, go ahead.
I mean, what if somebody went into confession and confessed to a murder?
Well, that's what I was about to get at.
Yeah.
The law on that.
You know, I mean, think about that. Because I'm sure there are people that have gone in.
Oh, yeah.
And confessed to a murder to a priest, and the priest is bound by law or by Catholic law or whatever it is
to cover it up.
To cover it up.
Well, here's the thing that happens with the legal system with that. So for priests, there was a proposed addendum to the federal rules of evidence that there be a provision in there that gave protection to basically priest and parishioner communications, just as there is a certain spousal communications law, things like that in the federal rules of evidence, but it was rejected. So there's no federal requirement on that. But as far as states go, there are many states that do protect that. And what's considered best practices by most priests and by most pastors is that you encourage them to go to the police. Right. And that's what is considered best practices, is that you encourage them to go to the police. So some states, they have upheld that privilege. Other states, they don't recognize that privilege. So it just depends on your jurisdiction. And again, that's why, you need to get in contact with your state legislators, become familiar with what the law is in your state, and push for these things. Because yeah, and I mean, there's people that do break the privilege even.
Yeah,
but that it just depends on where you are.
There was an episode years ago, Law and Order SVU, if I remember correctly. Chris, I know I'm quoting a TV show, but it was Chris Mahoney's character, who was Catholic, and if I remember correctly, it dealt with this whole issue of a murderer confessing to a priest in confession. And Mahoney's character basically said, Father, you have got to tell us the truth here. And I don't remember the outcome, but it's like in the 4th or 5th season, I think, where they deal with this. And New
York state law has one of the strongest priest penitent confession protections.
Yeah,
that surprised me.
I find it so bizarre, because it's like, how can you, and being that I'm a former ministerial student, this is a question I've even asked myself, how can you as a minister have, someone come to you, confess to a horrific crime of taking another person's life, and be like, oh, well, God forgives you, go on along your way, and not
how many Hail Marys and Our Fathers is a murder worth?
Yeah, and then bring it down or up or sideways, whichever direction you'd like to go, to a priest diddling a kid.
Yeah, how many is that worth?
And then what makes it even more heinous, in my opinion, is the fact that somebody like Bill Donahue, and he's not the only bloviating windbag from the hierarchy who has said this. It's been quite a few. I just picked out 3. To say, well, these kids were
asking for it because 7-year-olds are really sexual.
Yeah, well, Joe My God, on a blog I follow, he wrote about Donahue State, and he goes, Donahue goes on to denounce the media for using the term pedophilia to describe the incidents when Donahue claims most of the victims were post-pubescent.
I had some dickwad on another thread I was commenting on do that. They're like, they're not pedophiles. I'm like, okay, hebophiles, whatever the fuck you want to call them. They're assaulting minors. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's like
without a difference.
Splitting hairs over whether the child was 11 or 14 or 17. Yeah. I mean, the victims are in all age ranges from, I've heard, as low as 2.5.
Oh, wow.
Okay. This is not the 2.5 is not associated with the PA scandal. And I'm only halfway through the report. It's a 1,400-page report. And I gave up last night. I was like, holy fuck. But and then there's ages as high as 17. And there are also some adults in there as well as being abused. And those that are mentally incapacitated. There's in the report, there's talk of an actual pedophile ring where they literally marked the children by gifting them gold crosses.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep, I read that.
I didn't hear about that.
Oh yeah, it's in the report.
It was a signal to other priests, like, hey, this kid has had sexual abuse normalized to them because they've been abused by me. So go ahead and go after them.
Yeah. But, and this whole notion that Donahue brings forth was reinforced by a Dr. Taylor Marshall. And he's basically a Catholic theologian. And here's his 3 reasons for the sex scandal. Denial of the Christian faith. Okay. He goes on to say, these clerics are secretly atheists, agnostics, or Satanists who see the church. I'm sorry, my print's really small on here. See the church as a social justice network that pays well and provides a lifestyle of insurance, income, retirement, and unquestioned access to compromised men and vulnerable children. Okay, think about that for a minute. We'll come back to that. His second reason for the scandal, homosexuality. Okay, I don't have to say much about that. It's the whole pedophilia, homosexual bullshit. Okay, and his third reason, which is evolution of the megadiocese. Since 1900, the concept of the Catholic diocese has morphed into something that would not be recognized by Christians of the medieval period, and certainly not the church fathers. In other words, he's saying that abuse doesn't happen in smaller churches. Guess what, Mr. Marshall? You're wrong. Because basically, okay, where I live, churches here are small compared to New York City, Newark, Pittsburgh, Philly, etc. The abuses actually happen more in smaller churches because the victims have no one in position of authority to talk to. The bishop of our Catholic church here in town comes into town maybe once a year, if that. So if the pastor of the local Catholic church were to molest a child, which I am pretty sure he does, he's a pretty decent guy from what I can tell, they have no one to go to. I think our diocese, where the Catholic Church here in town is part of, is actually one of the bigger dioceses in PA because of its location. But this is the crap that the hierarchy's putting out.
Well, and what Clockwork Rex is saying here, when you have a worldwide religion with a theocratic capital city-state, aka Vatican City, and a strict hierarchical structure, it's fairly easy to vanish an offender in there, which is what happens.
Is exactly what happens.
Yeah, like Cardinal Pell, that Australian cardinal that they hid forever, and then they're like, "Oh, he's sick. Oh, he's in Italy. Oh, he's here and there," and yeah, it just goes to show, like, especially I love the like no true Scotsman thing they put in there. They're like, "Oh, well, it's a bunch of atheists and SJWs who are going around molesting kids and a bunch of gays." Like, no, you need to take accountability for your own fucking actions.
I'm sorry, but if you were grown, if you are consider yourself a Catholic to the point of joining the fucking clergy, you're a goddamn Catholic. I mean, they've got some of the strictest admission requirements for clergy in the world. No, virtually no one else does the celibacy thing. You know, you've got to be dedicated fucking Catholic to want to be in the clergy, and to sit there and say, "Oh, well, some phony person who's pretending to be a Catholic," like, fuck you.
Well, most of your clergy, from my understanding, when you decide to accept the call of the Lord and enter the clergy within the Catholic Church, you're about 17 years old when you make that decision. They start them young.
Yeah.
Okay. So for Marshall to say that, you know, they're secretly atheist or agnostic or Satanist, my favorite. I mean, it's like you said, Deb. I mean, you're talking, they would have to hold on to this delusion for at minimum 10 years.
Yeah.
8 to 10 by the time you finish your schooling for the priesthood.
Yep. And you've got to be...
Sorry, but your pay is not that great.
No, it's not. Unless you're like a cardinal.
Or a bling in Germany who got stripped, laicized not too long ago. I mean, the income is not that great. Your retirement benefits are not that great. Okay, my brother is a minister. Theoretically, he's a teacher, but he has, because of where he teaches, he's considered a minister. And so is my sister-in-law. And he does not make that much money.
Yeah.
Circle as hell, but he doesn't make a whole shitload of money. I mean, they're not making $100,000 a year. They're barely scraping by on maybe 45, 50. And in today's, you know, economy, that's not that much.
Yeah. I mean, they've got their housing provided for them and whatnot, but still, it's not like they're rolling in dough and that they're going to... It's not the kind of life where there's a huge incentive to pretend to be something you're not for that amount of time. And with that amount of dedication and potential sacrifice involved.
Yeah.
Like, let's be... it's just beyond ridiculous to think that... I mean, you might find one or two outliers of people who are that dedicated to whatever that they might try it, but hundreds and hundreds of people doing that? Are you fucking kidding me? No way.
Yeah.
Like, that's something right up Mike's alley, I think.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah. I don't know. Actually, I did have I've got the Donahue paper up here, and you know what really struck me here is one of the myths is the grand jury report was initiated to make the guilty pay. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, isn't that what a grand jury does, is to find the guilty? I mean, just from that one
literally
statement,
what their job is.
And is making the guilty pay a bad thing somehow?
That's what I'm like. Just from that one statement, I realized this whole document has got to be this guy must be smoking some pretty good dope out there. You know,
Catholic crack comes in little crackers.
Apparently,
too much of that wine.
It's been hitting the sacramental wine a little too hard or something. I don't know, but
oh, I know. They substituted the wafers for acid tabs. That's it.
That's got to be it. Because
Chris has a good comment. They said, "I'd love to see Lucien Greaves respond to this guy. Quote, we're not the one fucking kids."
Well, I find going to Trista's comment is that if you read the tenets of Satanism, violating a child or any person again without consent, well, with a child you don't have consent, but I mean that's like it's totally. I mean, this whole thing would be totally against. It's the opposite of what
very anti-Satanist.
Yes. It's like,
I would like to point out that nowhere in the Bible does it say don't fuck kids.
No, it doesn't.
Not even the Catholic Bible.
Nope.
I checked.
But yeah. But hitting on something Mike said, I mean, and I've already said it before, Bill Donahue really, I mean, if you read any of his prior stuff before this, it's like, dude, what are you smoking? He is not based in reality. He's like, he's so.
This is the Alex Jones. This is the Alex Jones of the Catholic faith.
Yes, he sees anti-Catholicism everywhere. I mean, if you say "boo," oh, that's anti-Catholic. It's like,
well, you know,
yeah, Alex. That's a good analogy. He's the Alex Jones of Catholicism. Yeah, I have to agree with that 1,000%.
Yeah, I mean, I've been reading through this, trying to, in between, and I'm like, what's this? What is this guy talking about? What is he even talking about? He's like, he's basically saying, don't pick on the church. I mean, just because there's, there's priests who like to diddle kids or, abuse, that's okay. It's just that because it's, all you're doing is, whatever. Oh man, it's like, I mean, I've read some crazy shit in my life. I've gone through these conspiracy sites, that talk about, I mean, things like there's this guy, Joshua Abraham, who he believes that, well, of course, the Vatican itself is really the Catholic Church is actually a Satanist church, and that apparently the gray aliens they work with the reptilians to manipulate the Catholic Church and to get the Freemasons to whatever, and I'm like, okay, yeah. When I kind of researched this guy, and apparently he learned all this after being kicked. He used to be a professional surfer in California, got injured somehow, and he had to live in his car out in a parking lot for like a year and a half, and then he discovered all this while he's sitting there baking in his car, I guess. Read the Bible and realized that this is what was going on, and I do see that in there's other conspiracy, these some of these prophecy guys and some of these others.
Well,
it
goes back to Alexander Hislop's book.
Probably, I haven't seen that.
And basically, it was an anti-Catholic screed back in the 50s. I might have it too far back, but yeah, there was a whole big anti-Catholic screed, and
I've got Alma White here.
Yeah, there's a couple, and then there was another one, and I don't have it handy. Another book where the guy initially followed Hislop's reasoning, and then he took some flack from the Catholic Church, went back within the Catholic Church, totally, quote, debunked his own book. And it's this whole, Catholicism is paganism, and their little hats, they're the Dagon, they look like a fish. And I mean, the conspiracy theories surrounding the Catholic Church, as far as paganism goes, I find it quite bizarre. Whether there's any truth to them, I don't know. But it's just like, it seems that Bill Donahue, specifically, has his like whole "don't pick on the church" bullshit is in response to that. And it's like, dude, no, we're not picking on the church per se. We're picking on your fucking ideology.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, your doctrine, your tenets, your whole hierarchy of your faith is basically designed, as it was mentioned earlier, to protect the church. And it goes to a saying that both Deb and I like to use, is if your ideology is that bad, then your or can't withstand criticism, then maybe your ideology should be thrown in the garbage.
Yep.
I mean, it's not the people per se that we're attacking, but it's this whole hierarchical structure within the church, within the doctrine, that is perpetuating this bullshit. I mean, you have, the confessional, that whole system that should be thrown in the trash bin because, criminals are being protected.
And that's what the guy I had in my thread just couldn't seem to get into his head, was that our beef was that they were covering it up more so than anything. We understand that an institution is not responsible for its members who do bad things necessarily. We get that, right? Because somebody in another thread said, well, so if you give money to the government, that means you're supporting killing people. I'm not sure where they got that from, but whatever. But no, it's not that they exist. It's that, number one, they're not doing anything about it. Number two, beyond not doing anything about it, they're actively covering it up. And for me, number three, they're also actively doing everything in their power to make sure that nothing gets done for the victims. And that almost is worse than the rest. It's bad enough that you're covering this shit up, but when you get caught and when you get told you got to pay for therapy, you got to compensate these people, and they do everything that they possibly can to avoid any responsibility whatsoever, there's where we have the giant elephant in the room, people.
Well, I think it comes down to Hammett Meta from Finally Atheists today, and I'm not exactly sure of the timing, but the dating is early this morning. Pierre Pope has put out his reaction, and it boils down to, we need to fast and pray. But I'm still digesting the Pope's response here, but I'm going to rely heavily on Hammett here. But basically, what he writes is this: that's all well and good, referring to the fasting and praying. He expressed deep remorse for the victims, but the real questions are what the Vatican plans to do to prevent future crimes and how they will punish those responsible for committing and covering up the abuse. Instead of actually offering any solutions, though, the Pope called for fasting and prayer. And he quotes from the Pope's statement, quote, "Penance and prayer will help us to open our eyes and our hearts to other people's suffering and to overcome the thirst for power and possessions that are so often the root of those evils. May fasting and prayer open our ears to the hushed pain felt by children, young people, and the disabled. A fasting that can make us hunger and thirst for justice and impel us to walk in truth." Blah, 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 blah. Pope, this is Hammett going on.
So thoughts and prayers.
Basically, yes.
And on an empty stomach.
Yes.
Oh. The diet, I'm sure, is the extra key that we've all been missing.
That's it.
Hammett goes on, Pope Francis said there were efforts underway to do something, but they haven't been implemented just yet. I am conscious of the effort and work being, this is Pope Francis again, carried out in various parts of the world to come up with the necessary means to ensure the safety and protection of the integrity of the children and vulnerable adults, as well as implementing zero tolerance and ways of making all those who perpetuate or cover up these crimes accountable. We have delayed in applying these actions and sanctions that are so necessary, yet I am confident that they will help to guarantee a greater culture of care in the present and the future. So in other words, we have a plan, but we're not going to follow it. So as Morgan said, thoughts and prayers.
On an empty stomach.
An empty stomach. But yeah, I mean, the Roman Catholic...
As Matt said in the internal chat here, yeah, I don't think so. I like to eat.
Yeah, I mean, the Roman Catholic Church has 70 years to implement something. I mean, anything, but they haven't done anything.
They don't want to.
Yeah, and as Hammett notes, I think this is the clincher for me coming from Hammett. He notes, the Pope's letter is a distraction. A way to pretend the Vatican cares without detailing how they will actually protect victims over priests. It's another victory for the PR Pope, and yes, he did use that term, so I'm so proud. But there's absolutely nothing in here that should encourage doubting Catholics that everything will work out.
Yeah, nothing.
You want to hear something kind of funny?
Please.
I have a cousin who's a Catholic priest, and he said the church started politics, and I believe that.
Yeah, I could see that.
I really do when you think about it.
You can consider the merger back with concerning Constantine. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, he said that the Catholic Church actually started politics. You know, years ago.
They started public relations.
Right.
For sure. They definitely did, because they were all about the image and not the substance. I mean, they're the ones that came up with indulgences back in the 13 or 1400s.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that took some doing. If anybody doesn't know what indulgences is, it was basically a system by which if you had money, you could go to your local priest or bishop or whatever and say, look, I have issues with, say, adultery. So I want to make sure that I'm always forgiven when I screw up and commit adultery. So here's a bunch of money. I want you to write out that I'm forgiven for every time I commit adultery from, either a certain period or from here on out or whatever. And I'll be good to go. It's like, okay, yeah, here you go. You give us lots of money and we'll absolve you of whatever the fuck you want. I've read that you could get a pre-absolution for murder. So if you were like, well, my grandfather is not dying fast enough so that we get our family inheritance, I want to bump him off. But so can you get me an absolution for murder because, old guy's got to go.
Talk about taking responsibility for your own actions, huh?
I know. It's like, I'm going to get it's like getting a pre-approved credit card, except it's for,
to get into heaven.
Fucking up people.
And Kevin, you just said on a thing, taking responsibility for your own actions. I think what makes this issue a thorn in my side is that Christians in general, and I'm including everybody, and I'm generalizing, not just Roman Catholics, like to lord over us satanic atheists that we have no morals.
Yes.
and they speak from a higher moral authority.
Assumed.
Assumed, yes. But yet they're now specifically Catholic, complicit in the diddling of children, and they see no problem with it whatsoever.
And we're getting lambasted. Well, how could you have any kind of moral framework if you don't have some sky wizard to dictate it to you? Like, you have to have a more an absolute standard, blah 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 blah. You can't possibly say anything is good or bad because you don't have a standard, blah 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 blah. Well, I'm sorry, but there's more of you out there messing with kids than there are of us. So who the fuck has the problem here?
And it's like I've been borrowing from Michael Wiseman, kind of a line he uses in some of his arguments. Like, someone brought up the whole moral standards things, and I said, well, do you consider killing innocent children, i.e., what's in the Bible, as being wrong? And they're like, well, you believe in abortion. And I'm like, what the fuck does that have to do? I mean, they changed the topic, and that's exactly some of the apologetic that is being used.
Well, and some of my thread and another thread on the same topic I was commenting in, the whataboutism was getting ridiculous.
Yeah, what about the government? They kill people. What about
public school? They're child molesters in public school. And then Muslim dude who was like, what about Islam? Except that I was supposed to be criticizing not Islam. I don't know. He was.
I don't know. He was definitely smoking something, or
yeah.
And I don't
ragging on me for not doing something that I was doing in the thread that he was ragging on me about. I don't know.
I mean, like, this kind of. I generally don't post about the Catholic Church because it's so over-encompassing. I mean, it's so broad. There's just so much to unpack. But it was funny as I was like doing these other side posts, things were kind of coming together all into one. And it's like reading some of the apologetics from the hierarchy, like Cardinal Burke. I don't know what happened in my notes where his stuff went, but oh well, it disappeared. But you got the Pope, you got Cardinal Burke, you got this theologian dude. Bill Donahue, in my opinion, doesn't count. He's just a windbag. But they're making all these excuses, and they're not even addressing the problem.
No.
Nope.
And
that's half the main problem is they're not, they're focused on excuses and not solutions.
Yeah, and it's like, I've read, I don't know. I listed a lot of the articles in the group under, for show notes that I've read just this week. And it's like every single one says the exact same thing. What are you going to do about it? And it's all excuses. And it basically, one article from, I think it was MSNBC, it might have even been Rachel Maddow, basically they were interviewing some people in a small Pennsylvania area. One of their priests, who is beloved, was on the list. And the tail end of this interview, after long silences, many insisted the allegations are just false.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, how do you
put yourself in the mind of that kid? It's bad enough that somebody you trusted has completely betrayed you. And then when you try to, you hear it in school and you hear it on TV, you should tell someone. And then you do. And you're like, how dare you make up something about Father so-and-so?
Well, that's what I went through when I said something to my mother many, many, many years ago concerning... And, oh, he's such a good Christian boy. He would never do that.
Wow.
Yeah. I was surprised. There's that book, Idiot America. was it Pierce, and they were talking about the Terry Schiavo case.
Oh, yes.
And there's the part where there's apparently the hospice that Schiavo was in had a priest on call for last rites, and apparently the priest went in to do the last rites. Schiavo's parents sent their priest and got into a fist fight right there in the hospice, that who's going to give the Schiavo her last rites. And the news reported it as that they wouldn't let a priest in to do last rites. And the was Annie Santa Maria was, they were talking in the book, and her mother, goes, or talking to her mother, and says, that's not what happened. These guys got into a fist fight. And then the mother said, but why would a priest lie? And I'm like, okay, here they're telling us, Santa Maria was telling her mother the story of what actually happened, but didn't believe her. They believed the news story. And
because the priest wouldn't lie.
Because the priest wouldn't. Why would a priest lie? And I'm like, that's really, I think that in a nutshell is the problem. Priests are infallible. Priests are supposed to be these higher moral, protectors of the moral standards that we're supposed to be adhering to. And then, and then when they when they get caught, I mean, and I know we talk mostly about pedophilia or abuse to minors, or even maybe, and some adults. That's kind of the focus what we're doing here. But what other nasty things these priests have done?
Oh yeah.
I mean, if they're hiding funds, and I want to say, because I think, I believe in Illinois, cemeteries are supposed to have a trust fund. It's a required. There's a perpetual trust to maintain the cemeteries. And you go by any Catholic cemetery outside of like Joliet, like you get into the rural areas, these cemeteries that are owned and operated by the Catholic Church are overgrown. Nothing's maintained. They claim, and they cry that they don't have the money to maintain these cemeteries. And I'm like, wait a minute. That's not how Illinois are supposed to operate. I mean, I think, I forget what year, because I think, but anyhow, older cemeteries may not necessarily be covered, but after a certain date, they're supposed to be having these.
And I don't remember what state that was, where that parish had done it.
But it tells me that the church has done something with the money and whatever they bought or whatever they pay. Did they fix the rectory, or sent money to the bishop's relief fund, or whatever they sent their money to? I mean, that money, and there's supposed to be money there to maintain those cemeteries. So there's some type of fraud, some type of thing going on there, but nobody raises the question. Nobody doubts that, when they tell you, oh yeah, we just don't have money to maintain it. We can only do it once a year.
Just did a quick little Google, and I got a story, and this is from, it looks like a Montana publication, the Missoula Current. So I don't know anything about this, but this was from January of this year. And it says, lawsuit, Montana diocese hid assets to avoid paying clergy sex abuse victims. And it says, creditors have filed suit against the Catholic Diocese of Great Falls Billings, alleging the church transferred more than $16 million in assets and cash to a nonprofit corporation shortly before declaring bankruptcy to, quote, avoid being held accountable by victims of clergy sex abuse. The asset protection scheme was intended to shield the church's assets from its creditors while, quote, still maintaining complete control over the assets, the lawsuit contends. Calling the transfers fraudulent, the suit, filed in U.S. bankruptcy court from the District of Montana, seeks to recover the $16 million for use in the settling claims filed against the church in scores of sexual abuse cases. That's just in one diocese in Montana. Says resolution of the lawsuit is critical to the diocese's bankruptcy proceedings, and the lawsuit continues because it will determine the magnitude of distributions to its creditors, including survivors of the childhood sex abuse enabled by the diocese, or whether the diocese can continue to avoid being held accountable to the survivors. 86 victims of childhood sexual abuse by the church officials have made claims against the Diocese of Greater Falls Billings since 2011.
And that's just Montana. So you know they're doing that other places.
It's going on in Minnesota. It's going on in Wisconsin. I know it's going on specifically in Milwaukee. But going back to the whole notion that Mike brings up about priests and ministers. Now, these are not specifically Catholic, but this is just to give you an idea about fraud within the church. Beluga pastor pleads guilty to stealing $95K in disability benefits from a church deacon to bank fraud. Pikeville man sentenced. He was $65K, if I remember. Beverly Hills Church trying to find its footing after theft by former church secretary. Tennessee prophetess stole $162,000 in funds from hungry kids. That's in Lexington. I mean, I have headline after headline after headline. Some are specifically Catholic. How a pastor with a $825,000 housing fund built a nightmare for Dallas homeowners. I mean, like Mike said, if they're doing the diddling kids like they are, and they're trying to hide this, what else are they hiding? I mean,
well, like I also pointed out to my not so friendly friend in my thread, one of the biggest stains on the Catholic Church outside of the sex abuse scandals, they supported the Nazis.
Yeah.
They were full on, like, you know, go Hitler. Yeah. There's oodles of pictures of bunches of cardinals and whatnot giving the Nazi salute.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I mean, it does. Well, in the overall grand scheme of things, and I don't know if he brought this up, you brought this up, or one of your other commenters said, yes, the Catholic Church has done some good within
that was him.
But, and, you know, when you have something as immense as diddling children, or you take the recent news that Mother Teresa's charity in India may have been selling children, not to mention the torture she put all those people through for years. Yeah, I mean, you have issues like that, and that's just, you know, then you take
modern era. Well, for instance, so he did make a post. So, well, the Catholic Church has done this, that, and the other thing that's good. And my response was, it's not too big, so I'll read it here. I said, you talk about the good that the church does. Yes, it's done some good things. You know what else it has done? Forced Catholicism on countless millions over the last 2,000 years, killing many who didn't wish to convert, and destroying hundreds of cultures and societies of the ones who did convert. It forced Jews to convert and then formed the Inquisition because they weren't sure Jews could actually convert after all. And then it led the way and codified the abysmal treatment of women. It stifled science and global enlightenment. It allowed disease and mass death to thrive through its stifling of science, too. Women who learned something of medicine were labeled as witches and executed by the church. I mentioned Mother Teresa, so I don't have to do that again. Oh, and speaking of women and children, The church also taught women that their sexuality is dirty and sinful and treated unwed mothers like criminals. It forced many to give their children away and grieve for them for the rest of their lives. The church charges money to light candles and pray for loved ones, and it once charged money to be forgiven or to speed a loved one's passage through purgatory. These are just the things I can cite off the top of my head. And then later I said, oh, I bet you don't even know one pope in 897 dug up his dead predecessor and put his corpse on trial for perjury and becoming pope illegally. The corpse was found guilty, of course. And I said, just because a bad institution might do a few good things doesn't absolve them of being a bad institution. The church has enough resources to feed millions of poor, yet they continue to house their senior clergy in palatial accommodations and hoard vast collections of art and other valuables. Catholic hospitals, yeah, sure, they heal people, but they also refuse to allow death with dignity and refuse other procedures they don't like. Some women have died because the D&C after a miscarriage is seen as a abortion, and they were refused care. The more I think about it, the longer the list of reprehensible actions grows. And then I mentioned that they support the Nazis and whatnot.
It's just, yeah, it's just mind blowing because, I mean, you look at what, Cardinal Pell in Australia, you look at the issue in Ireland with the orphanages there.
Yes.
I mean, you have the issue here that seems predominantly a U.S. issue with the pedophilia, although I know it's not just the U.S., but it seems to be more in the news or in our faces. I mean, it's just, it's worldwide.
Yeah.
Well, it's become worldwide because here in America, we're focusing on it now.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's extended into other countries, especially like in Australia and wherever else. So it's becoming, we're setting the, we're setting things up for everybody else.
That's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And that's the way I see it. Now, I could be totally wrong on that, but, like I said, that's just how things are going.
Yeah. Well, we're getting about to the end here, folks. Gentlemen, did you guys want to have any more else to say before we start wrapping up?
I just have a question.
Yes.
It's a legal question, so...
Morgan, you're up.
I wonder why they don't treat the Catholic Church as a criminal organization that could be tried under or go after under like RICO standards. That there's basically the whole hierarchy. If corrupt organization from the frontline priests all the way up to the enablers, if you're in it, even if you just okayed the moving of a priest, you may not even know that this guy was a pedophile or molester or whatever. Just by moving them makes you guilty, and just bring them all under one big RICO case and try them like the mafia.
Yeah, so the thing with RICO is, so it was designed specifically more for racketeering type crimes. And so this also allows leaders of a syndicate to be tried for crimes they ordered others to do. It also does allow for what they have assisted people in doing. So possibly something there, but mostly that way you can't say, hey, I'm a mob boss, so I ordered, Johnny to go shoot Greg. And then that way I can't be like, oh, well, I didn't shoot Greg. I just told Johnny to, so I can't be convicted of murder. So that's what RICO was designed to close that loophole on. But it's so initially it was just used for mafia, but it has become more widespread. So that actually has been brought up in Catholic sex abuse cases. So in some jurisdictions. So, for example, a Cleveland grand jury did clear 2 bishops of racketeering charges, and it found that their mishandling of sex abuse claims did not amount to criminal racketeering. A similar suit was, they declined to file a suit against another Cardinal, Bernard Law, who was the Archbishop, I believe, of Boston.
Yes, he was the one
yes.
embroiled in the Boston case.
Yeah, so also in 2016, RICO charges were considered for cover-ups in Pennsylvania. So it has been considered with the Catholic Church, but so far to date, as to my knowledge, there has been no successful claims brought on RICO. RICO deals more so with mafia type things, but people have considered bringing it because it's an organization that's helping cover up crimes. So you're absolutely right in thinking, oh, well, maybe there's something to a RICO thing here. And again, that goes back to what we can do, and what we can do is hold our attorney generals accountable and, ask them these questions about why haven't you pursued RICO charges? If you live in areas like Pennsylvania, ask them those questions and have them held accountable for that.
Yeah. So, Mr. Keebler, get your ass in gear.
No, it'd be nice if they, because actually, if they could be held on that, that may shake up these hierarchies that have.
Well,
I would.
If you have a potential of going to jail because you did something, maybe then you're getting one.
They're far less likely to go, oh, not my problem, if they can get their asses handed to them as well.
Yeah. Because, once liability's on the line, you'd be surprised at how quickly people go to cover their ass and go to correct things and throw people under the bus and just are like, no, it's these people. It happens so quick, but someone has to hold them accountable.
If they went and arrested Frankie, and said, you're the top of the heap, buddy. You're down for everybody. I wonder how fast they would start throwing themselves under the bus for Frankie.
To see. Yeah. I mean, people aren't really usually willing to throw themselves under the bus, but the thing is people willing to throw other people under the bus. You'd be surprised at how quickly those convictions go away once, an actual criminal conviction becomes potential for yourself. But so it's all about holding these people accountable. But RICO charges have been looked at as a way to get at these people, because at this point it's very clear that they're playing this sort of shell game with these priests, oh, well, we'll just move them to South America, and that way, we don't have to deal with them anymore. And let's move especially with the moving of money and the hiding of assets. Like, to me, that is textbook organized crime, right? Textbooks. So it has been looked at, but I think that there's also a lot of political pressure in these areas where the Catholic Church is powerful, and there's also a lot of money involved. Yeah, there's a lot of money involved, and that's why separation of church and state is so important. And again, it's all about, going and making sure that, nobody really, I wouldn't say nobody, but a lot of people don't really pay attention to who their attorney general is and what kind of cases they're bringing. So I think this would be a good thing for people to look into.
Excellent. Matt, you got anything you want to add?
Well, I just think that, this whole thing, I mean, it's sad, because here we are, umpteen years later when all this started coming out, and, things are still being swept underneath the carpet.
Yeah.
And it needs to stop. It does. Because we're not solving anything. And the more it's swept under the carpet, the worse it's going to get.
Absolutely.
So, it's terrible.
And I
don't
what
these people have gone through, and they're not, there's no closure in it.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest problem. They need to have closure, and they can't get the closure because of all the crap that's going on, and the things that are being swept under the carpet, and nothing's being done. Mm-hmm. So that's my comment.
And I'm sure you feel pretty useless and undervalued when nobody seems to give a shit about what happens to you.
Right. Exactly. And that's another thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. I appreciate popping on in the short notice, and Matt for
No
getting
problem.
hauled in from the chat.
No problem. I'm glad I was able to join.
Yeah. Like I said, I know I have a number of ex-Catholic friends, but remembering who was one and who was something else is sometimes a challenge. So I appreciate it.
Well, I knew
And-
your topic was going to be this, so I was on my phone actually, and
Okay. Well, I saw
saw
that
that, and I typed in the chat that I'm an ex-Catholic as well, and I didn't know if you were going to see it or not, and then you saw it, and you're like, "Oh, come on in."
get in here. Get in here.
I think it goes to like this topic as a whole is humongous. I mean, and the 4 or 5 of us tonight barely even scratched the surface, and we are lay people. We are nobody special. It is just amazing. I mean, as I said, the AG report is 1,400 pages. I'm halfway through it. I do know some people that have read the entire thing, and it's mind-blowing. But like Matt said, it should not have taken this specific report to get our asses in gear. We've known about this for years, going back to Spotlight.
As I said, that Spotlight was 17 years ago.
I mean, and then I mean, I literally, when I saw the comment concerning the servants of Pericles and the video Mea Culpa, I'm like, I've never heard of that. So I literally, like, is this comment talking out their ass or not? So I went and looked it up, and lo and behold, it's even older than Spotlight. I mean,
Yeah.
it goes back to 1974 when the concerning Mea Culpa, servants of Pericles go back to 1948.
Yep. And just so you know, Matt posted in the chat that his power just went out, so it's a good thing we had to get his last thought in.
Oh, bummer. But yeah,
I thought I was going to get it.
I know. I was like, we thought Mike was going to get sucked out the window.
But yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of talk. I mean, a lot of other podcasters are going to broach this topic, and as much as it's hard to take it all in, we need to take it all in. We need to get different perspectives on it, and that's why I appreciate Matt and Mike both coming on, being ex-Catholics, and read everything you can read. I mean, make up your own mind. Don't go by just what we said or what Joe Blow down the street said. And for those, that are Catholic, that are on the fence, I mean, you can't deny the information that's out there. This is not some big lie. This is not some big anti-Catholic conspiracy.
No.
Basically, what it boils down to is what you said in your post that, drew so much attention. It will not change the fact that we are that you, as a Catholic, are complicit in the sexual abuse of children. That's the...
Yeah.
That's
if you're a Catholic and you're giving money to the church and supporting them, you are supporting the abuse of children. That's it. There's no way around it. You don't get to dictate to them what they use your money for. They're going to use it however the fuck they want. And right now, one of the number one things they're using it for is hiding priests.
Yeah.
And you don't get to say, I don't want to be a part of that. They're just going to do it because they've always just done it.
Mm-hmm. And they're not going to tell you until their feet are held to the fire. They're just going to keep hiding it if it is being used for that.
Yep. And you might have the most wonderful parish priest in the world in your parish. Great. That's wonderful. that doesn't mean that you're not contributing to this problem. That doesn't mean that he's not contributing to that problem, whether he knows it or not. He might be completely oblivious, but he's still contributing to the problem. So
well, it's the one article that I mentioned is that, you know, that's what it can't be our wonderful police, or he was so great on the list.
Yeah.
Oh, I suspected that. Well, why didn't you do something 25 fucking years ago?
Abusers are some of the best liars out there. And if you think they're not gonna lie to God, you're delusional, because they will fucking lie to God or anyone else that they think that they can get away with it. If they think all they got to do is a bunch of Hail Marys and get absolved, they're going to lie to fucking God because they can get away with it. So don't for a second think that being religious makes somebody a good person, because it doesn't. In fact, in my estimation and from my experience, the more religious somebody is, the less of a good person they tend to be. And I've seen that over and over and over and over again. So, you know, don't try and convince me that I'm delusional, because I ain't. I'm not. Sorry.
You know, I've seen too many times, you know, these guys they were in the church. I didn't know it until much later, but these guys, they were every Sunday they were in church and, you know, doing the good Catholic thing. But then during the week, these guys are cheating on their wives. They're, you know, treating people like shit. And then all they have to do is go back into church and 3 Hail Marys and you're back on the street, you know, type of thing.
As long as you make sure you get absolved before you croak, it's all good, you know.
Exactly. I like the George Carlin bit when he does the Catholic. They talk about confession, and I'm gonna butcher it because you got to listen to it. It's like you know, the Scott or the Irish kids in the neighborhood. You know, they would go into they wanted to do confession with Father Rivera because he didn't understand the sins, apparently. because the Irish kids who were heavily into puberty would go in with all these, you know, bless me, Father, for I've sinned. I've touched myself in an impure manner, and in impure touch, rub, and covet. A lot of covet there at Father. Father Rivera goes, "That's okay, man. Trace Santa Maria's, you know." But the Irish priests, why did you do that, George? You know, because they all knew their names. You know.
Matt made it back.
I'm back.
Just in time to say goodbye, but that's okay.
Sorry about that. I was in the middle of middle of talking, and all of a sudden, boop, power goes out. I'm like, oh man.
Yeah.
We had a storm go by.
Anything we missed on you?
I can't remember what I was actually saying before I got disconnected.
Okay. Well, we'll go through everybody's. We didn't give you a chance to plug your show and stuff yet, so so before you vanish again, Matt, tell us where we can find you.
Well, our show's on hiatus for a little while. It will be back at some point. Packard pokes that. We're not doing it. We don't do live streams. The only live stream we do would be the last Friday of the month. We're okay. Let's talk. But like I said, right now we're on a hiatus for the time being, but we will be back at some point.
How is that Packard guy anyway? I haven't seen him for a while.
He's doing okay. He's just been really busy, and has some things going on. So
real life tends to really fuck with your podcasting, doesn't it?
Yeah, he's got issues with work and whatnot. So
yeah,
I don't want to get into any details about it, but
hopefully we'll see him soon.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back into it.
Well, you never know. We'll maybe have another topic for you soon.
Well, hey, if you ever need me, just you know how to find me. I'd love to be on your show. I mean, this is the second time I've been on your show, so
Yay. And
you need
I'll
somebody to fill in
remember
or whatnot,
now.
let me
I will
know.
remember that you used to be a Catholic. So
Write it down.
yeah, I
I'm
have to
sorry
have
that
a list. Everybody on my Facebook page, sound off with your former delusion. Go.
also I'm sorry that your trip had to be cut short by the issues with your motorcycle. I kept following you on Facebook and all the information you were giving. I'm like, oh man. But I know you're looking forward to that trip, so
I know. I was really bummed that I missed the second half where we were going to visit all of our podcaster friends, but yeah, shit happens.
what can you do? As long as nobody was hurt or anything.
Yeah, we
you
got to
back
Vegas.
safely.
We got to the Grand Canyon. So that was 2 out of our 3 main goals.
Yeah.
So,
Well, at least you did something. So that
we did.
that's
did.
good.
And hey, like I said, I got to go to a Star Trek convention with Callie Wright. So
Hey, there you go. Yeah, I saw that too. I wish I was there. That would have been pretty cool.
Oh, it was so fun. But anyway,
Is that in Vegas?
Yes, it
Okay.
was. It was Star Trek Vegas, which apparently is one of the bigger conventions.
Okay.
Like virtually every living actor was there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It was. I did not know Patrick Stewart was going to show up. He wasn't listed on any of the literature. He showed up at a surprise thing. And
oh, wow.
I missed that part, but
yeah,
I got to see pretty much everybody else.
Wow.
We're a bit over though, so we'll talk about that after. Mike, tell us where we can find all the conspiracy goodness.
Yes, that would be A Skeptic's Guide to Conspiracy. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, all your, I guess most of the podcatchers. My website is mikebohler.com, MIKEBOHLER.com. And that's pretty much me.
Sorry. Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us. And I swallowed water the wrong way. Isn't that great? Morgan, where can we find you?
All right. Well, you can find me on the Bi Skeptical podcast with Tris Mamone. We come out about every 2 weeks. We just did an episode on Omarosa's tapes. And also we talked some more about the Catholic Church report. You can find that on iTunes, Spreaker, and Stitcher. You can also find me on Twitter at Mostring. That's MOSTRING. You can also find me on Facebook at Morgan L. Stringer.
Woohoo! And Beth, where do we find you?
Easiest way to find me is on Twitter, Dune9998. That connects to my blog, Havoc and Chaos, and I surprisingly have been posting concerning the recent debacle in PA. And posting, let's see, I think last week I posted 75 stories concerning diddling priests and lay people associated with the church. So it's really coming out of the woodwork. But that connects to also to my Facebook, which is Beth A. Hambridge. If you send me a friend request, please put that it's related to the show, or I most likely will not accept you. So
I friended you, and you friended me back. So
yeah,
there you go.
I recognize the name.
I'm easy. I'm easy to recognize.
Well, it's funny. The other day, I got a comment on my blog written in Arabic. And I'm like, dude, I don't read Arabic, so I have no idea what it said. But, it's like, if you're going to send me something, do it in English, please.
Well, Google Translate does Arabic. See, I wouldn't be able to not know what it said, so I would plug it in.
I thought of Google Translate, but I had already deleted it. So
Actually, I found this out from somebody that Arabics read from right to left.
Yes. So you have to select it backwards, or it's going to be a pain in the ass to copy. Yeah. What's even worse is when you try to reply to somebody who's got an Arabic name, because then it starts writing backwards with the letters facing the proper way. That's trippy. Don't do that if you're smoking weed or something.
Or you're intoxicated.
Oh, goodness.
Okay there?
All right. Yeah, I'll live. As I say, one little drop of water, the wrong direction. Well, you can find me back in Ontario for starters. Be done traveling now for the rest of the year, as far as I know. We were only home for about 3 days, and we had to go up north to my niece's wedding on the weekend, which is like another 8-hour drive. But that was fun. I survived, and I'm so pleased. No religious crap at the wedding. Like,
cool.
None. I was very pleasantly surprised. In fact, my niece is part Indigenous, so they actually had an elder come and sing a tribal song, and that was really cool. So, but no talk of Jesus at all weekend. I was so happy. But anyway. You can also find me on Holy Crap the Vlogcast, which is Sunday mornings at 12:05 a.m. holycrapthevlogcast.com. And guess what we're talking about on Saturday night / Sunday morning? More
Taking the finger up your ass and doing nothing?
No, being that Shujin is himself an ex-Catholic.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. Excuse me. In fact, he held off on talking about it until I could get back to be on the show, because they were going to talk about it last weekend. But I was like, I have to go to a wedding. I can't be there. So I really appreciate that. We're going to talk more about the sex abuse scandal and the Catholic Church. So those of you who think that I'm biased against Catholics will probably think that they're right. But yeah, you haven't read my page. I go on and on about Islam all the time too. But then, of course, the Muslims tell me that I'm what, a Zionist Jew lover then, because whatever.
Not white trash redneck Jew lover.
Yeah. Oh, and fake atheist.
Fake atheist. That was another one I saw.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone else is like, is he calling me a fake atheist or a fake white guy? Because I'm not sure.
Heretic woman, anyway. A fake atheist.
Yes, fake atheist. Woo.
We're just want to be atheists, that's all.
Oh, yeah. I've been trying it for 29 years this summer.
Hey, there you go. Well, you've been an atheist that long, huh? You've been an atheist that long, huh?
I have. Next year is going to be 30 years.
Wow.
I have to do something to celebrate. I don't know. I have to have
a 30th anniversary party.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd have to have it somewhere where more people can come. I don't know. We'll have to think about that. Start thinking about it now, folks.
Okay.
We got a year. Anyway, and if you want to, if you think that I'm biased against Islam, you can affirm your delusion by listening to me read the Quran at fullquranic.com, because I read the Quran so you don't have to. So you can do that as well. You can find me there. And we'll be back here next week. Not sure what we're going to talk about yet, but that's okay. I've been slacking because I've been on vacation and traipsing around. So my apologies. I haven't been as diligent about getting ahead of the game as I am usually, but these two kept things going quite well. We only missed one show last week because we either were feeling like shit or exhausted or whatnot. So it's all good. Missing 1 out of 4 weeks is not bad. I'm okay with that.
We all need a vacation every once in a while.
We do. We do.
I had the whole show pretty much outlined, but then, yeah. Like,
you're feeling well, and that's okay.
Yeah,
you're
like 40 minutes before show starts, I start feeling like doo-doo, and I was like, well, no.
Well, and I didn't even remember it was Monday, so I woke up because we only got home from the road the night before, and I woke up from a nap and I didn't even know what day it was. So
Yeah, you were a little.
yeah, I was like, okay, I'm home, but what day is this again? Oh, it's Monday. Oh shit.
Oops.
Oops, but that's all right. So we will see everybody here next week, and look at that, you guys got like a extra bonus half hour out of us. So there you go. And until then, yeah, everybody have a good, great week, and we will leave you with the Humanist Creed, and see you then.
I know the truth and power of reason and of rational thinking, and I will use them to my advantage. I know the truth and power of educating myself and of expanding my intellectual boundaries, and I will educate myself. I know the truth and power of vanquishing ignorance, and I will do so whenever the opportunity presents itself. I know the truth and power of morality without supervision, and of true and accurate righteousness. I know the truth and power of obliterating tyranny, be it intellectual, emotional, or philosophical, and will work toward that goal whenever and however possible. I know the truth and power of human ingenuity. I know the truth and power of human compassion, and I will be mindful of the welfare of others. I know the truth and power of equality and fairness for all living things. I know the truth and power of the importance of our families, our friends, and our fellow men and women. I know the truth and power of human stewardship of our lands, our waters, and our skies, and I will try to act to preserve our environment. I know the truth and power of the sciences of mathematics, of physics, and of chemistry, and of the important role of these disciplines in understanding the workings of this cosmos. I know the truth and power of the rejection of all notions or beliefs that reside in the supernatural or the superstitious, and of those notions or beliefs that we are not supposed to be able to explain. And I know that these rejections are necessary for humankind's survival. I am a human being with a free mind, liberated from irrational influence and from unreasonable dogma.